Alright, here we go. So this is a league I 5-0'd. I'm gonna commentate over the league, and this is our game 1 opening hand. Has Once Upon a Time and 2 expedition maps and 2 lands, which means I have technically 4 lands if I get up to it, and Once Upon a Time can find me anything. So, provided this works, right off the bat I'm gonna Once Upon a Time. That's far too fast. Well, Once Upon a Time grabbed a ancient tomb in order to accelerate out both of the expedition maps. Misty and a Taiga from the opponent is terrifying, and to me that typically means that they're playing lands, but the Dryad Arbor just confuses me a bunch, so now I think they're on a red Blood Moon version of Elves. Misty Rainforest happens, and then I realize when I see the Simian Spirit Guide, or in this case an Elvish Spirit Guide, hit the Exile pile, that it's some sort of crazy combo. I see the Progenitus, and that's whatever. I have a crop rotation in hand, so I know I can just go make a 20-20, and that's bigger than a 10-cent, so I set that all up, pass over to him, get slapped in the head by Progenitus himself for 10 damage, make a 20-20, and then slap him in the head with a 20-20, which is directly better than a 10-10. So, that was our game 1. Here we are on game 2. I sideboarded in some interesting cards. Most notably was this Warping Wail, which is in my opener, and that counters a sorcery. Natural Order is a sorcery, so I look at this hand and I decide this is probably good enough, or probably as good as it's gonna get. Considering I could also crop rotation on turn 1 for the Warping Wail. So opponent goes Misty, Taiga, goes into the same exact play pattern of Dryad Arbor first. I think that's perfectly fine. I put up my crop rotation, get that ready to rumble. My opponent does the same exact thing, this time getting the extra mana from an Ancient Tomb instead of a Spirit Guide. I respond by cropping into the tomb to Warping Wail. Elvish Reclaimer is pretty good here because it starts a clock and he probably can't rebuild in time. And I'm also just so darn close to making a 20-20 and killing him that having an additional crop rotation up's probably really smart. So it doesn't really matter. I figure I won't need to crop rotate here, and instead I can just use the actual crop rotation in my hand to make the 20-20 on his end step. Well, he doesn't find anything to do, and instead of letting him play his monstrosity of a not real deck, I just kill him. Cool. Going on to round 2. So here is second match of my league, and this opener has kind of a little bit of everything. Allows me to play around Wasteland really well, so it's a keep in this current meta for sure. Opponent starts off with a Misty. Ponders, that's either a really good thing or a really bad thing, but from the Snow Island, I'm inferring that he's either Miracles or 4-color control, and that's probably a good thing. I figure I can bait him into overreacting to an Elvish Reclaimer by playing out an Elvish Reclaimer when the real problem is Cloudposts. So I let him handle that, that's fine. Then I just start playing Cloudpost, because 2 basics in the blue-white colors and a swords, it's Miracles, or some sort of variant. The Savannah really throws me for a loop. The Oko throws me for a loopier loop. My loop is now very thrown. I go, cool, how about a Pithing Needle? And that resolves and names Oko. Now he just has a food token, and that doesn't seem very good now, does it? My opponent plays the best card ever printed and continues onwards. I'll just pop my maps, get Eye of Ugin. I crop rotation here in order to Eye of Ugin this turn, but he doesn't end up letting that happen. The reason I do that is because in my hand I have a Thespian stage, so that'll work as a third Cloudpost, along with some other mana. He does a value Snapcaster, just to ponder again. I'm realizing that him having a Savannah that doesn't make blue is probably really, really hurting him, and I'm wondering if that's like a total mistake. Because this is clearly a deck testing out a new card. A very good player, Jarvis U on it, but the card Oko doesn't really work well when there's a Pithing Needle. So we do the old copy, do the old double copy, tutor around. I have exact mana for tutor and go get Thought-Knot Seer. So I figure I can do that. He's only got 3 cards in hand, and either this resolves and it just like ends the game, or it gets Force of Willed and then I just end the game later. It gets Swords, which is fine, because he gets to draw the card, and then I get to see. I rip out the counters. What the heck did I take here? Saw this. Damn. This thing goes fast. I tutor with Eye, because it doesn't really end up mattering. Just get enough to hardcast Emrakul. And no amount of Force of Wills or Counterspell, whatever he had / I let him have, mattered. I think at this point he had Counterspell in his hand, and instead he goes for Snapcaster because you cannot counter Emrakul. He Brainstorms, so I'm not really sure why he's doing this. I guess it makes him more monks for the Annihilator trigger, which is fine. So we get to do that, that's pretty cool. He sacrifices the brand new card he's testing first. Out of all the cards, he takes 13 damage. Mirage Mirror goes onto the stack, and my bloodthirsty tutor for Walking Ballista curves the game right out because the counterspell that I know is in his hand is uncastable. He tries to scare me here, but I do not falter in my resolve to resolve a 3/3 Walking Ballista and shoot him for 2. There we go. He concedes because I would have killed him. So going into the second game against Jarvis U, I have 2 different kinds of post, a bunch of Thespian stages, a Blast Zone that I brought in from my side, a Pithing Needle, and a Reclaimer. It's perfect because it handles all the cards that the Miracles decks get, which means that I can just put Blast Zone to 3, use Pithing Needle to name something that I can't get with Blast Zone, and we're perfectly fine. Thespian stage gives me multiple Blast Zones so I can handle all of his threats and just carry on right through it. The Reclaimer's not castable, but the rest of the hand's so good. It just doesn't end up mattering. Opponent does a Ponder off of a Trop. I think that's interesting. So I'm assuming at this point that the Savannah really is because he's running Council's Judgment also, and that really drives you into playing a lot of white, so that's probably why he has to play a card that's both of his off-splash colors, because, you know, Miracles is just a blue deck splashing, in this case, 2 colors for this Bant. There's Bant Mentor. Maybe it's not Miracles. I guess you call it Bant Mentor. So the Elvish Reclaimer comes out. It gets Sword Splash Airs. The Null Rod looks real fantastic right here, as it's stopping literally nothing. Okay. That looks pretty good, but I have the Pithing Needle yet again. So I'm going to slam that bad boy. It's going to resolve, and Null Rod does not affect it. I'll play a Thespian stage to copy into more Cloudpost later. Because that just looks fantastic, doesn't it? That's in case if I draw any tutor effect to go get Eye of Ugin or Eye of Ugin itself. And I have so many tutor effects to go get Eye of Ugin between the maps and the Reclaimers and the Green Zenith 4 Reclaimer and the actual card itself. Because against Mentor or Miracles, you side out your crop rotations and bring in things like Krosan Grip, in my case, Blast Zone. So he disenchants, which is pretty scary. So So his Oko and his mentor are doing things. His Oko turned his food token into a 3/3, which means that all of his relevant permanents are 0 converted mana cost and 3 converted mana cost, which means 2 Blast Zones kill his entire deck. So I tick up my Blast Zone, and then I copy a Blast Zone, and then I detonate both of my Blast Zones to clear out all the 3 drops and all the 0 drops. So he now has absolutely nothing, and I get to just curve into a Prime Time. Drawing the Emrakul off the top is absolutely just gravy, because even if he has a counterspell for this or some way to handle it, it's going to be over really fast. It actually resolves, I get my Eye of Ugin, I get my Cloudpost, life's looking fantastic. Pass to your opponent, that's just what you want to see, a concede right there. It's good stuff. Alright, so here is going into our third round. I have an opener that allows me to choose between a start on Cloudpost and Snow-Covered Forest, as well as Crop Rotation to interact, Once Upon a Time to do right before I do anything, Green Sun Zenith, and this hand's absolutely amazing. So we're gonna keep this one. Opponent plays a Heath. That's sometimes pretty darn terrifying. I decide I'm just going to go get a Cloudpost, and since I assume he has Wasteland in his deck, I'm going to go with Elvish Reclaimer. Which is funny, because I have a Windswept Heath in my deck, but I am no Wasteland deck, for sure. My opponent plays a Taiga, and now I'm thoroughly scared that I'm playing against some sort of lands deck with just a horrifically bad draw. I keep open my Crop Rotation and try and bait out a Wasteland. Success in baiting out the Wasteland is met. I go get myself a new Cloudpost and decide that I'm just gonna ramp out. So not swinging this time so I can keep up my Reclaimer as Crop Rotation for the turn. He plays a Wasteland but can't do anything with it because he's too scared. I'm just gonna Reclaimer and he's gonna lose a bunch of value. He plays Knight. Knight's terrifying. I get to my turn and very happily Reclaimer first. Oh no, don't do that. Oh yeah, I got a Prime Time. Ah, that's smart stuff. It's even better. The reason I went for this is because I remember this specific instance. If I were to go for Ugin and then he Wastelands me, then I can't go for Prime Time. But by going for Prime Time and then he Wastelands me, I can then go for Ugin. And I'm really in the mood to -4 in Ugin right about now. And because I went for Primeval Titan, the double Wasteland isn't even enough. I get to bog him out, shrinking the crap out of his Knight, and then I get to play an Ugin. Life's great. Because I have so much mana, I let him trade his Death Toucher because I needed those Glimmerposts. I'll play the Ugin, and now I can bolt it, which is very nice, which means that in 2 turns, the Ugin just kills him itself. My opponent keeps that. Alright, so here's our game 2. I'm taking a look at this hand for a hot second. I see that I have a Bog in my hand, excuse me. That would allow me to shrink a Knight. It also prevents me from getting Rend out of existence, if he's running that also. The Ancient Tomb gives me good acceleration for a Thought-Knot Seer, the Pithing Needle, and the Map. And the Elvish Reclaimer can come off a Woodlot, but there's no basic forest for it, which is kind of unfortunate. So the hand's not perfect, but I figure it's serviceable, and I don't want to go down cards. So the turn 1 Chalice invalidates 3 of the cards in my hand, and it's suddenly looking like I'm in a much worse position. I decide that my only real card is Thought-Knot Seer, so I plan for a turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer by trying to go Woodlot into Tomb. My opponent plays a Stage, which I'm assuming is a 1-of in their deck, and a Ramunap, which means that they can just start looping these Horizon Canopies for value. And that's pretty terrifying. I take a look in his hand, I see a Punishing Fire and a Tranquil Thicket. Exiling the Punishing Fire means I'm never going to have to deal with that again. The Thicket and the Horizon Canopy grind so much, but he puts them both in his graveyard, and I'm able to bog his little engine away. I start realizing that I can connect for 4 because he has a 2/3 and I have a 4/4, and I start doing exactly that, praying for prime time off the top. Palace Jailer makes me very sad. It takes my one card that I was beating him in the head with and gives him the Monarch, which is an absolutely insane effect in Legacy. If it is playable, you should probably try playing it, because it gives you an additional card every turn, and Palace Jailer takes a card, and it's a 2/2, it's not rentable, it doesn't die to Plague Engineer, you have to have 2. So, very good card. And the Monarch just kind of buries me in value this game, and I'm not able to recoup. There's a few cards that if I were to have top decked, I would just like slam right out of the game. Like if I could have found a Green Sun Zenith, or if I could have found a Primeval Titan. At this point, it's really just Primeval Titan that's my out. Because I have so many cards stranded in my hand, there ain't much to do. Besides pass, copy my Cloudpost on his end step, and just hope I top deck. So I realize that I can gain some life here and survive another turn, especially with the extra life that I get from copying. I realize I'm really close to Emrakul, like really, really close, and I start trying to fill up my graveyard. But that very opportune Wasteland takes away all of the happiness that I thought I was going to get to enjoy by casting an Emrakul. So the long stream of Cloudpost and him forgetting to attack were both very nice. So eating another Wasteland is very unfortunate. The Wasteland hitting anything that created 2 or more mana prevents me from casting Emrakul, even though he should have most certainly hit the Cloudpost. Here I actually do have crop rotation up, but that doesn't really matter because the crop rotation can't really do anything regarding the continuous onslaught of Wastelands because of the Ramunap Excavator. So my opponent's double Wastelands into triple Wasteland into just for the rest of the game is too much. I can't find a green source to go get the prime time right now because he Wastelanded my Woodlot. So, going on to game 3. Alright, so here's my opening hand. I had to mull, so I tucked a card underneath. I'm keeping a hand with Force and crop rotation, which are really, really good in case he goes deep on a Chalice or deep on a Sylvan Library. And Sylvan Library is actually really an important card because his deck doesn't generate value very easily or draw cards very easily, but Sylvan Library is an absolutely obscene magic card, and that can be stopped. So I'm going to be holding this Force of Vigor and hoping that that card gets me there in this instance. Leaning on Windswept Heath, the 1/of fetch is really, really good because it helps Reclaimer get big enough to survive. Sometimes you crop rotate a forest away for a fetch to fetch for another forest to like maintain having a basic land so you can't be wastelanded out. The Pithing Needle comes down before his Chalice can, and I name Wasteland because I don't want that to happen against me. And I decide that I can just kind of ramp out whilst Wasteland is handled. And I do exactly that. The Blast Zone threatens to blow up right now, next turn, and combine with the Knight of the Reliquary to start getting me Wastelanded. My Ramunap Excavator is a fantastic draw, comes into play, and starts occurring some value as my opponent is able to soon make his own Wastelands. So I Force of Vigor because I really wanted to get rid of that library, and that Chalice I figured was becoming a problem because I did want to play the Pithing Needle to name the Knight. But the problem right now is that Blast Zone exists, and Blast Zone, if detonated at 1, takes both my Pithing Needles and lets him have Knight. So I have to play the second Pithing Needle in my brain right now to name Blast Zone in order to keep this Pithing Needle naming Wasteland, which lets him activate Knight but not get Wasteland as a legal target. Things to keep in mind while doing this is that he probably has access to 1, Thespian stage, 2, Ghost Quarter, and 3 Karakas. So those are other things that I need to be really careful of. And because I do have Ramunap, I could get bogged myself. So these are all the things that I'm thinking right now in the game. So out goes the needles. So now I can actually name whatever I want. I get wastelanded again, and this looks real rough. Thought-Knot Seer comes down. I get to see what's going on, and I get to take a card. I got to take his Ramunap Excavator so he couldn't loop the wastelands against me. I play the second Pithing Needle, name up the Knight of the Reliquary, so that can't activate anymore. And I see his hand is Punishing Fire, Dark Depths, and Green Sun Zenith. Only Green Sun Zenith is something that does something. That gets a Reclaimer, he draws a Wasteland, which looks really good. And then now he has this Reclaimer that he can start activating around. I play my own, realize that I can start smacking him, and I proceed to do exactly that and start smacking him. Punishing Fire can kill my Knight of the Reliquary, and there's nothing I can do about it because I can't fill my yard. I get slapped, copies Maze of Ith, so now I have a maze for his Knight of the Reliquary, and his Knight of the Reliquary is Pithing Needle, and he has a bunch of Wastelands in the yard, so 2 Wastelands in the yard here. So that means he's very unlikely to top deck it. And Elvish Reclaimer brings them in tapped, so he can't tutor right now to go get the Wasteland he wants. So I just keep tapping it down, and then just strive to draw out. Drawing Eye of Ugin. I let him crop, that's fine. He gets Wasteland, it comes into play tapped. I can't tell if he misplayed there or not, but I go into Eye of Ugin knowing that even if he Wastelands me, I can just copy in response and get something. So the Dark Depths is pretty nice. Because Knight of the Reliquary can't activate right now to go get Karakas, Wasteland's the only thing he has right now to foil my Dark Depths plan. So I think that's just dandy. I go get Ulamog, try and bait him into Wastelanding me. Very predictably he does that. However, at this time I sink in my Blast Zone to get it up to 3. Play out another one. So my opponent's 2 11 11 3 drops is pretty insane, but I can still Maze of Ith them down one at a time, and the Blast Zone can blow them up 2 at a time. That's really, really fantastic. But I don't actually have to use my Blast Zone since I have Ulamog, and he has no way to stifle the actual trigger or counter the spell. So I just figured that Ulamog and Ramunap Excavator can beat this guy to death together. And they can. My opponent's Scoops. Going on to match 3 of the league next. Alright, I figured this is actually the relative best way to start round 4, which is the current round. I am currently 3-0, and I'm on the play. I win the die roll, my opponent also keeps 7. I have a Once Upon a Time in my hand, but I do also have the Forest Reclaimer play. So I decide to Once Upon a Time anyway, knowing that I'm going to cast this Reclaimer on turn 1. And at least transferring the Once Upon a Time into a usable card for 0 mana is basically the same thing as casting Ancient Stirrings, but this Ancient Stirrings, instead of being able to get me the Expedition map, which is what I really would have wanted here, it allows me to get Glimmerpost or Primeval Titan, either of which are fine, and the reason that I still like it more than Ancient Stirrings here is because it doesn't matter, because I'll still be able to make a 1-drop. So instead of spending my turn Ancient Stirrings, I'm actually committing an Elvish Reclaimer to the board, which lets me get crop rotations online. So I'm just totally in love with Once Upon a Time and its ability to just allow me consistent Elvish Reclaimers on turn 1 with so few forests. When I decided to include them, I cut one of the forests for one of the Once Upon a Times, and then I cut a Mirage Mirror for another. The reason being is that Once Upon a Time does not get Mirage Mirror, so I figured cutting a little bit there would be smart. So I grab Prime Time to have a solid threat, and then I go into a Reclaimer, probably thoroughly vexing my opponent as to what I am playing. He's probably assuming some crazy pile of Amulet garbage is about to kill him, and he takes my Primeval Titan, like the scared man he is. I assume that because I got Thought Seized off of Bayou, I'm probably playing against a fair deck, and then realized that, hey, look, this looks like the mirror, of which I'm incredibly favored. I decide I just want to play around with developing my mana base and holding up my Reclaimer, knowing that he has a lot of stuff that he has to do that just plays directly into my Thespian stage. So as long as I'm able to keep my Thespian stage ready to go, or just play around with my own cards that are part of his combos, he can't really go off easily. And the best thing is that his Duress and Thoughtseize aren't getting him that much value. Thoughtseize prevents him from dying, which is fine, but Duress gets him absolutely nowhere. And I realize that his hand is a lot of like permission / disruption that isn't working. So this other Duress comes down, and I realize that, oh, he's just got to go make it 20/20. And then I realize that, oh, I'm kind of messed up. I probably should have gotten Karakas a turn earlier, but hey, that's what good deck building's for. Ripping off that expedition map off the top, throwing out a Karakas, bouncing that stuff like I had it the whole time, and slapping him upside the head. He Duressed me the second time, and he definitely would have been able to connect with that Merit Lage, but hey, listen, my deck has more tutor effects than a lot of decks, so it's going to happen sometimes. So now my Karakas is under threat of attack of Ghost Quarter, so I just decide, hey, that's probably a fine time to go make some gigantic Eldrazi. And that's like really good to do. My opponent lets me actually use my Eye of Ugin, which is fantastic. I'm very thankful to him doing that. So I steal game 1 out from underneath him, but this is a matchup that is super in my favor anyway. Like, the chances of me top decking a card that gets me out of that specific situation is just so high because of the construction of my deck. Alright, so game 2 against Depths, I bring in these Force of Vigors because a lot of the matchup devolves to us both having access to a lot of Pithing Needle effects, and then us naming a ton of cards that stop each other from playing the game, and then Force of Vigor suddenly opening up 2 of the cards or giving me access to lock pieces that he's locked away is really useful. Also, Sylvan Library is an insane magic card, and it kills them, so that's absolutely great. My 2 Cloudposts and a Thought-Knot Seer and a Mirage Mirror are perfect as threats. The Mirage Mirror can prevent him from going off, the Thought-Knot Seer can strip a card and eat him to death, and in the Force of Vigor, I can pitch my Green Sun Zenith if I don't need a Reclaimer, or I can pitch my Crop Rotation if I don't think I'm going to get green in a while. So, overall, pretty good hand. Pretty good hand. My opponent has no turn 1 disruption, which is great. Very excited by that. I draw a win condition, which is fantastic, but I think to myself that if I really got to pitch this force, it's probably going to take a win condition with it instead of a lock piece. I do decide that that 1 Lotus Petal is enough to aim for, because I was figuring that this guy had access to Elvish Spirit Guides if he's playing Lotus Petal, and that means he probably has access to like 20/20s out of nowhere. So the Force of Vigor is able to stifle 1 mana that he wanted, and possibly that makes the difference here between him like making a 20/20 on this end step or not. I just commit an Elvish Reclaimer to the board, and if that Lotus Petal mattered, I saved myself a life. It eats out an Abrupt Decay, and that's really upsetting. The Vampire Hexmage comes down, and I'm like, oh, well, he could have a 20/20 here, and that would suck. But the Ramunap Excavator can get back a unwastable green source that can go get Crop Rotation that could be a Karakas. So I just continue making land drops, holding up some interaction. Landing the Mirage Mirror is really fantastic. Despite him having a 2/1 and me having a 2/3, I don't decide to attack, because this matchup really revolves around 20 life, and if I were to attack, it would put him to 14, which wouldn't matter, but it would put me further away from 20, and right now I have Crop Rotation for Glimmerpost isn't out, and I also drew a Glimmerpost, which put me to 21. If I were to attack, like, I still would be at 19 here, and still lethal to 1 hit from Merit Lage. So getting yourself to 21 life is really important in this matchup. It lets you mess up a turn, or it lets you have no answer for a turn, and then get hit. Typically, then you get another turn, and then it's fine. Like, whatever he's hoarding down for the turn, or whatever he, like, wastelanded, like, you can get back, or you can figure out how to get through. So then, just ramp out here. Just put an Emrakul onto the stack to take his turn. And that's that. There's just so much you can do with an Emrakul on the stack. Okay, we're going on to the final round, which would be round 5, which was... Tensions are high. This is the last round of the last match of my league that decides if I go 4-1 or the 5-0 that I've been searching for. I get a hand with Eye of Ugin, which is kind of dead, but the rest of the cards are kind of decent, including Warping Wail. And I know Elvish Reclaimer is really good in the matchup, and since I'm on the play, I know I really want to get it down early. So I just jam it. So a special shout out to Elvish Reclaimer for this league, as that card is the reason that I think I 5-0'd, as it's just so obscene. He unmasks targeting me, rips one of my Warping Wails away, and I Pithing Needle down Grizzlebrand, keeping Elvish Reclaimer up to activate. So I'm faking being able to get my Bog because I draw it even though I didn't mean to, and I think Strifo had the win at this point, and he respected my Bog enough to not try and combo off. I Bog him here and have my Reclaimer set up to crop the Woodlot into Vesuva to get a second activation of Bog. And I let him pass over the turn, crop rotate the forest, go get a Dark Depths and start lining up the kill. So now I have the kill lined up, I have Bog lined up, so this is gonna push him to try and go off this turn. And since I do have some Vesuva's abilities to create Bogs again, I'm able to just stop doing 20/20 things and start doing Bog U things. Bog him right on out. Feeling pretty good about myself, but he careful studies again, and I realize that the blue-black version has so many more ways to feed their yard than red-black does, that's a legitimate advantage of it. Thankfully, you know, sometimes you just get some extra stages, and you're able to just keep the threat going. He tries to do it again, and I slap him down for a third time, teaching him that he needs to respect Vesuva. What a fantastic Magic card. Yep, so that was the whole league. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it helped. So round 2 against blue-black Reanimator. I see a hand with a little bit of acceleration, a way to get to a win con pretty quickly, a crop rotation for early, and a spear to hide behind soon. So the things that I'm hoping my opponent does not have is a discard heavy draw with a lot of artifact acceleration. Press play. There we go. Cool, no disruption. Hand just gets better with the Faerie Macabre. I decide that I don't need to hold up crop rotation because I have Faerie Macabre and go into Woodlot. Here I decide that I really don't have too much mana. He already has access to too much mana for Sphere to be super strong. So I Thought-Knot Seer instead, trying to bait him out into filling up his yard or reanimating. I look into his hand, strip away an Assassin's Trophy, leaving him with the ability to Entomb, Careful Study, and Brainstorm. He tries to reanimate, and I Faerie Macabre it out. I go into a Spear of Resistance, where he has a few too many lands already. He responds by Brainstorming, and now his hand's looking pretty thin. He Entombs. I realize that I don't have any way to really handle what he's trying to do, and just as I pass the turn, I realize that I should have Pithing Needle Grizzlebrand, and I end up doing it a little bit later. And kind of like last time, the Elvish Reclaimer, I end up dying, where being in position to start dying, because the Elvish Reclaimer doesn't get a untapped Karakas, and instead it gets a tapped one. I am scared, I am afraid, and I am packing not enough ever anti-reanimator cards. My opening hand has actually a bunch of them, including the ability to crop for an Ancient Tomb and stick a sphere. So I figure, it's game 2, this is probably good enough. My opponent does not turn 1 Thoughtseize me, and I draw a Faerie Macabre. I'm feeling great. I go for the slightly riskier play that Faerie Macabre baits me into, of just playing the Woodlot and passing. Plays out perfectly, and I crop rotate, get a Thought-Knot Seer, take a look in his hand, let him brainstorm, I guess. And if you noticed, everything went wrong there. He brainstormed the card he wanted to the top of his deck, leaving what I wanted to do stranded. So he's able to reanimate. Luckily, I do have the Fairy. And now I got a 4-4, and now I got a Sphere. Brainstorms in response. Entombs in response. And now I realize that he can still cast any reanimation spell, and the Sphere is kind of just too late in all respects. With a Griselbrand in the yard, he's able to reanimate, but not able to activate it, leaving me in a tough spot of casting Reclaimer, casting Needle to name the Griselbrand so he can't hit me for 7, and then and then use the 7. And now I'm realizing that the Ancient Tomb that I have, and the other Ancient Tomb that I have, don't really work that well, because of the low life total that I'm going to quickly have from getting slapped by Griselbrand twice. So I had actually lowered myself to way too quickly lethal range, and I'm unable to go get anything with Elvish Reclaimer because it puts me far too low, and then I just die to Griselbrand. And since Karakas comes into play tapped off of Elvish Reclaimer, I'm able to do nothing, and I concede.